In the glittering skyline of Dubai, where ancient traditions meet modern ambition, Rashid Al-Mansouri built an empire that spanned 3 continents. At 40 years old, the Emirati billionaire commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. His kandura crisp and white, his gutra perfectly positioned with the traditional agal. He had everything money could buy, everything except the one thing his heart had begun to quietly desire. After years of focusing solely on business, Rashid found himself at a crossroads, surrounded by luxury but increasingly aware of an emptiness that no acquisition could fill. His family pressured him to marry within their circle, to choose a suitable Emirati woman from an established family. But something always held him back. He told himself he was too busy, too focused on the next deal, the next expansion. But deep down, he wondered if he was waiting for something or someone he couldn't quite name. Emily Hartford never imagined her. Life would take her 7,000 miles from Boston to the shimmering desert metropolis of Dubai. At 27, she had spent 5 years working her way up from receptionist to executive assistant at a struggling marketing firm in Massachusetts, only to watch it collapse during an economic downturn. Suddenly unemployed with student loans still hanging over her head and a sick mother depending on her support, Emily faced a choice: settle for whatever local job she could find or take a risk on an international opportunity that promised double her previous salary. When the recruitment agency presented her with a position as personal secretary to a prominent Middle Eastern businessman, she hesitated for only a moment before accepting. She knew nothing about Arab culture, had never traveled outside the United States, and had certainly never worked for a billionaire. But Emily Hartford had always been resourceful, determined, and unafraid of hard work. She packed her bags, kissed her mother goodbye, and boarded a plane to a world she could barely imagine. Neither she nor Rashid could have predicted that a simple hiring decision would transform both their lives in ways that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and the courage it takes to follow your heart across every boundary that seeks to divide us. The Dubai heat hit Emily like a wall the moment she stepped off the plane at Dubai International Airport. Even in the climate-controlled terminal, she could feel the weight of it, the dry intensity that made Boston's summer humidity seem almost quaint by comparison. She pulled her navy blazer closer, suddenly self-conscious about her conservative interview outfit as she watched women glide past in designer abayas and men in pristine white dishdashas. Everything felt foreign, the Arabic announcements echoing through the terminal, the ornate gold fixtures that decorated every surface, the sheer scale of wealth on display in the luxury shops lining the corridors. Emily gripped her carry-on bag tighter and reminded herself why she was here: her mother's medical bills, her own financial stability, and a chance to experience something beyond the narrow confines of her previous life. She had researched Dubai obsessively during the long flight, reading everything she could about Emirati culture, business etiquette, and the man she would be working for. Rashid Al-Mansouri's public profile was impressive, but revealed little about the person behind the success. She knew he was 40, unmarried, and ran a conglomerate with interests in real estate, technology, and sustainable energy. What she didn't know was whether he would be kind, demanding, or impossible to please. A driver holding a sign with her name waited in the arrivals hall, a professional Emirati man in his 50s who introduced himself as Hamad and welcomed her with courteous formality. As they drove through Dubai's spectacular landscape of soaring towers and palm-lined highways, Emily pressed her face to the window like a child, overwhelmed by the Burj Khalifa piercing the sky, the massive construction projects transforming the desert into urban paradise, the pristine streets that seemed to sparkle in the afternoon sun. Hamad explained that she would be staying in a company apartment in downtown Dubai, just minutes from the office, and that Mr. Al-Mansouri expected her to rest today and report for work tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp. The apartment turned out to be far more luxurious than anything Emily had ever experienced. A spacious one-bedroom unit on the 30th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city and the Arabian Gulf beyond. She stood at those windows for a long time that evening, watching the sun set over the desert, the sky transforming into brilliant shades of orange and pink, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Rashid Al-Mansouri sat in his corner office on the 45th floor of the Al-Mansouri Tower, reviewing Emily Hartford's resume for perhaps the 10th time since approving her hiring. His previous secretary, a efficient Filipina woman named Maria, had retired after 15 years of service to return to her family in Manila, leaving shoes that would be difficult to fill. The recruitment agency had presented him with several candidates, all highly qualified, but something about Emily's application had caught his attention. Perhaps it was her background, working class, self-made, no connections or privileges to rely on. Or perhaps it was the reference letter from her former employer, who, despite the company's failure, had written glowing praise about her dedication, intelligence, and integrity. Rashid valued integrity above almost everything else in business and in life. He had built his empire on it, refusing shortcuts and bribes that other businessmen accepted as normal practice. At 40, he had achieved everything his father had dreamed of and more, expanding the family's modest trading business into a multinational corporation. Yet success had come at a cost. His mother called weekly, not to congratulate him on his latest deal, but to remind him that wealth meant nothing without family, without children to inherit it all. She had a list of suitable women prepared, daughters of business associates and old family friends, but Rashid couldn't bring himself to choose a bride like selecting an asset for acquisition. Emily arrived at the Al-Mansouri Tower at 7:30, giving herself time to navigate the building and compose herself before the 8 o'clock appointment. The lobby was a study in modern luxury, all white marble and gold accents, with a massive chandelier that must have cost more than her entire year's salary. Security checked her credentials and directed her to a private elevator that served only the executive floors. As she rode upward, her stomach tightened with nervous anticipation. She had worked for demanding bosses before, but never for someone of Rashid Al-Mansouri's stature and wealth. The elevator opened directly into a reception area, where a young Emirati woman greeted her warmly and explained that she was Fatima, the front desk coordinator. Fatima seemed genuinely pleased to meet her and offered to show her around before the morning meeting. The office suite was stunning, contemporary design mixed with traditional Arabic elements, expensive artwork on the walls, and windows everywhere offering spectacular views of the city. Emily's workspace was positioned just outside Rashid's private office, a spacious desk with dual monitors and every piece of technology she could possibly need. "Mr. Al-Mansouri is very particular about his schedule and his privacy," Fatima explained in accentless English as she showed Emily the filing system and explained daily protocols. "He arrives exactly at 8 every morning, takes his coffee plain Arabic style with cardamom, and expects complete discretion about all business matters. He can be demanding, but he's fair and actually quite kind once you understand his ways." Maria, the previous secretary, loved working for him. She only left because of family obligations. Emily absorbed every detail, making mental notes and asking questions about preferences and procedures. She learned that Rashid traveled frequently, often to Abu Dhabi, where his family lived, and occasionally to Europe and the United States for business. He expected his secretary to be available during working hours and sometimes beyond, but he also respected personal time and never demanded unreasonable sacrifices. As Fatima spoke, Emily felt her anxiety easing slightly. This sounded manageable, professional, and even potentially rewarding. At precisely 8 o'clock, she heard the elevator chime, and Fatima straightened immediately, glancing at Emily with an encouraging smile before returning to her own desk. Rashid Al-Mansouri stepped into his office suite carrying a leather briefcase and dressed in traditional Emirati attire, a pristine white kandura that seemed to glow against his tan skin, a white gutra held in place with a black aggle, and the subtle scent of oud cologne that Emily would come to associate with his presence. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with strong features, a neatly trimmed beard, and dark eyes that missed nothing as they swept the room before settling on her. For a moment, Emily forgot to breathe. She had expected someone imposing, someone who carried authority like a weapon, but she hadn't expected the combination of traditional dignity and modern sophistication that Rashid embodied. He moved with quiet confidence, not arrogance, and when he extended his hand to greet her, a concession to Western business customs, she realized, his handshake was firm but brief, respectful of the cultural boundaries around physical contact between unrelated men and women in his culture. "Miss Hartford," he said, his voice deep and accented but his English flawless. "Welcome to Dubai and to Al-Mansouri Enterprises. I trust your journey was comfortable and Fatima has oriented you to our procedures." Emily found her voice and assured him that everything had been excellent, that she was grateful for the opportunity and ready to begin. Something flickered in his eyes, approval perhaps, or simple acknowledgement, before he nodded and gestured toward his office door. "Good. We have a busy day ahead. Please bring your tablet and join me for our morning briefing." The first weeks passed in a blur of intensive learning and constant adaptation. Emily discovered that working for Rashid Al-Mansouri meant operating at a pace and level of precision she had never experienced before. Every email had to be perfectly composed, every meeting flawlessly scheduled, every document organized with exacting standards. He never raised his voice or showed impatience, but his expectations were crystal clear, and he noticed everything: a typo in a report, a 5-minute delay in responding to a client inquiry, a missed detail in travel arrangements. Yet he was also scrupulously fair. When Emily made an error in her second week, accidentally double-booking him for 2 important meetings, she braced herself for anger. Instead, Rashid simply asked her what she had learned from the mistake and how she would prevent it from happening again. When she explained her new verification system, he nodded approvingly and never mentioned the incident again. That fairness, that willingness to focus on solutions rather than blame, earned his loyalty more than any salary could have. She began to notice other things about him too, small details that revealed the man behind the billionaire facade. Rashid was always the first to arrive and often the last to leave, working with the same intensity he demanded from others. He never asked his staff to do anything he wouldn't do himself. When a crisis erupted at one of their construction sites, requiring someone to fly immediately to Abu Dhabi at 10 o'clock at night, Rashid went himself rather than sending a subordinate. He was generous with his employees, paying above-market salaries and providing benefits that exceeded industry standards, but he also held everyone to high standards of performance and integrity. Emily watched him navigate complex business negotiations with a combination of shrewdness and honor that she found fascinating. He could be tough in defending his company's interests, but he never resorted to deception or manipulation. More than once, she saw him walk away from lucrative deals because the other party wanted to cut corners or engage in practices he considered unethical. His word was quite literally his bond, and in the Dubai business community, that reputation was priceless. Most surprisingly, Emily discovered that Rashid had a quiet sense of humor that emerged in unexpected moments. One afternoon, after a particularly tedious conference call with a difficult American client, he caught her rolling her eyes in exasperation, and the corner of his mouth quirked up in a barely suppressed smile. "Mr. Patterson does enjoy the sound of his own voice," he observed dryly, and Emily had to bite her lip to keep from laughing out loud. Another time, when she accidentally spilled coffee on her desk, thankfully not on any important documents, and began apologizing profusely, Rashid simply handed her his own handkerchief and said, "Even the most careful sailors sometimes encounter rough seas, Miss Hartford. This is why we have contingency plans and cleaning supplies." His eyes held that same glint of amusement, and Emily felt herself relax in his presence for the first time. She was still his employee, still maintained every professional boundary, but she began to see him as a complete person rather than just an intimidating boss. That shift, subtle though it was, would prove more significant than either of them could have imagined. 3 months into her employment, Emily had settled into life in Dubai with surprising ease. She had made friends among the international community of expatriates, discovered favorite restaurants and cafes, learned to navigate the metro system, and even picked up a few basic Arabic phrases that delighted the local shopkeepers. Her apartment had transformed from a sterile corporate rental into a genuine home, decorated with finds from the souks and photographs of her mother that she looked at every evening during their video calls. The generous salary allowed her to not only pay her mother's medical bills, but also to save money for the first time in years. She felt proud of what she had accomplished, proud of her ability to adapt and thrive in such a different environment. Work remained demanding, but deeply satisfying. She had mastered Rashid's systems and preferences, anticipating his needs before he voiced them, managing his complex schedule with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Their working relationship had developed into a comfortable rhythm of mutual respect and unspoken understanding. But Emily was beginning to notice something else, something that troubled her late at night when she couldn't sleep. She had started paying too much attention to Rashid Al-Mansouri, not just as her employer, but as a man. She noticed the way he held himself with quiet dignity, even in stressful situations, the rare smiles that transformed his serious face into something warm and approachable, the kindness he showed to everyone from the building's cleaning staff to his highest-level executives. She noticed how he never belittled anyone, how he listened more than he spoke, how his word was absolutely reliable in a world where promises often meant nothing. She noticed, with a flutter in her chest that she tried desperately to ignore, how attractive he was, not in a conventional Western way, but in a way that spoke of strength, integrity, and depth of character. These observations frightened her. Rashid Al-Mansouri was her boss, a billionaire, and most importantly, from a completely different culture and background. Whatever she was feeling needed to be crushed immediately, before it grew into something that could jeopardize her job and her ability to support her mother. Rashid had his own growing awareness that he tried equally hard to dismiss. Emily Hartford had proven to be everything he had hoped for in a secretary: efficient, intelligent, discreet, and adaptable. She learned quickly, worked tirelessly, and brought a fresh perspective to problems that his previous secretary, excellent though she had been, might have missed due to long familiarity with their systems. But beyond her professional competence, Rashid found himself noticing other qualities that had nothing to do with work performance. Emily had a natural warmth that seemed to brighten the office atmosphere. She was unfailingly kind to everyone, remembering details about their families and lives, making people feel valued and seen. She had a quick wit that occasionally flashed through her professional demeanor, making him want to hear more of her thoughts and opinions. And she was beautiful, not in the heavily made-up, designer-dressed way of the women his mother kept suggesting he meet, but in a genuine, understated way that grew more apparent the longer he knew her. He found himself looking forward to their morning briefings, to the sound of her voice explaining schedules and summarizing reports, to the rare moments when she forgot to be professionally distant and let him glimpse the real person beneath the secretary. This was dangerous territory. Rashid knew she was his employee, under his authority, and he had promised himself long ago never to abuse the power his wealth and position gave him over others. The crisis that would change everything began on an ordinary Tuesday morning in November. Emily arrived at the office to find Rashid already there, which was unusual given the early hour, and the expression on his face told her immediately that something was seriously wrong. "My mother has been hospitalized in Abu Dhabi," said without preamble, his voice tightly controlled, but unable to hide his worry. "She collapsed at home last night. My father called an hour ago. I need to leave immediately, and I may be gone for several days, depending on her condition." Emily's heart went out to him, remembering her own terror when her mother had been hospitalized the previous year. "Of course," she said immediately. "Don't worry about anything here. I'll reschedule your meetings and handle whatever comes up. Just go be with your family. Is there anything I can do to help?" Rashid looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his eyes. Gratitude, perhaps, or recognition of genuine compassion. "Thank you, Miss Hartford. I knew I could rely on you." He paused, then added something that surprised her. "My mother, she's been the anchor of our family. Losing her would—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Emily understood perfectly. The next 3 days were chaotic. As Emily managed the office in Rashid's absence, fielding calls from concerned business partners, rescheduling crucial meetings, and making executive decisions she had never been authorized to make but knew were necessary. She worked 16-hour days, sustained by coffee and determination, knowing that Rashid needed to focus on his family without worrying about business falling apart. Fatima and the other staff rallied around her, impressed by her competence and grateful for her leadership during the crisis. On the third evening, as Emily sat at her desk at 9 o'clock, reviewing the next day's schedule, her phone rang with a call from an Abu Dhabi number. Her heart jumped as she answered, hoping for good news. It was Rashid, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "My mother is stable," he said. "The doctors say she'll recover, though she needs to make significant lifestyle changes. We were very fortunate." Emily felt her own relief wash over her, surprising her with its intensity. "I'm so glad to hear that. Please give her my best wishes for a complete recovery." There was a pause, and then Rashid said something that made her breath catch. "Miss Hartford, Emily, I cannot adequately express my gratitude for how you have managed everything in my absence. My father spoke with some of our business associates today, and they all mentioned how professionally you handled their concerns. You have gone far beyond your duties as my secretary, and I want you to know that I see that and appreciate it more than I can say." The use of her first name, the warmth in his voice, the genuine appreciation, it all combined to create a moment of connection that felt far more intimate than a simple business call. "I'm just doing my job," Emily managed to say, though they both knew it was much more than that. "I'll see you when you return. Take care of your mother and yourself." After the call ended, Emily sat in the quiet office for a long time, staring at the Dubai skyline, glittering with lights, and admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling for Rashid Al-Mansouri, and she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Rashid returned to Dubai the following Monday, and Emily noticed the change in him immediately. He seemed more thoughtful, more present, as if his mother's health scare had shifted something fundamental in his perspective. During their morning briefing, he thanked her again for her work during his absence, and this time he did something unusual. He shared details about his mother's condition and recovery plan, talking about his family in a personal way he never had before. Emily learned that his mother, Sheikha Amina, was a remarkable woman who had supported his father's business ambitions while raising 5 children and maintaining strong connections to both traditional Emirati values and modern perspectives. "She told me something while I sat with her in the hospital," Rashid said, looking out the window at the city he had helped build. "She said that she and my father built their fortune together through partnership and love, and that my success means nothing if I'm alone to enjoy it. She asked me when I was going to stop hiding behind work and start living my life." The conversation felt too personal, too intimate for their professional relationship, and Emily didn't know how to respond. But Rashid seemed to need to talk, and she found herself listening as he opened up about the pressure he felt from his family to marry, about his resistance to choosing a bride from the limited circle of acceptable women his culture and social position presented. "I know my duty to my family and traditions," he said quietly, "but I also know that I cannot enter a marriage without genuine respect and connection. I have seen too many of my friends and cousins trapped in empty marriages, unions arranged for business or social advantage that left both partners isolated and unhappy. I would rather remain alone than live that way." Emily's heart ached for him, for the impossible position he found himself in, wanting to honor his culture and family while also wanting the kind of authentic relationship that seemed unavailable within those boundaries. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," she said softly, "and I think waiting for something real rather than settling for something convenient. Show strength, not weakness. Rashid turned from the window and looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Thank you, Emily. Your perspective means more to me than you might realize. The shift in their relationship after that conversation was subtle but undeniable. Rashid began to ask for Emily's opinions on business matters during their meetings, valuing her fresh perspective and practical insights. He started sharing more about his life outside the office, mentioning family dinners and cultural events with a casualness that suggested he wanted her to know these parts of himself. Emily found herself doing the same, talking about her mother's progress, her exploration of Dubai, her growing appreciation for aspects of Emirati culture she had initially found bewildering. Their morning briefings, once strictly business-focused, now often included these personal exchanges that felt like the building blocks of genuine friendship. Emily tried to tell herself that was all it was, a professional relationship deepening into friendship, but her racing heart whenever Rashid entered the room told a different story. And sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something warm and searching that vanished the moment he noticed her attention. They were both dancing around something neither dared to name, and the tension of unspoken feelings began to fill the space between them like the charged air before a storm. The situation came to a head in early December, during the company's annual gala celebrating the anniversary of Al-Mansouri Enterprises' founding. The event was held at a luxury hotel overlooking the Dubai fountain, with hundreds of guests including business partners, government officials, and prominent members of Dubai's elite society. Emily had been involved in planning every detail of the evening, but she had assumed she would be working behind the scenes, coordinating logistics, while Rashid networked with his guests. Instead, he had specifically requested that she attend as a guest herself, saying that she deserved to be recognized for her contributions to the company's success. Emily had purchased a modest but elegant navy dress for the occasion, uncertain about appropriate attire for such an event. When she arrived at the hotel ballroom, she felt overwhelmed by the opulence and the sophisticated crowd, but Rashid found her within minutes of her arrival. He wore traditional formal attire, a white kandura of extraordinary quality, a cream-colored bisht trimmed with gold thread draped over his shoulders, his gutra and agal perfectly positioned. He looked every inch the successful sheikh, commanding and dignified, and Emily felt her breath catch at the sight of him. "Miss Hartford," he said, though his eyes held a warmth that belied the formal address. "I'm glad you could join us this evening. Please, allow me to introduce you to some of our key business partners." Over the next hour, Rashid kept Emily at his side as he navigated the room, introducing her not as his secretary, but as my invaluable colleague, Miss Emily Hartford, whose expertise and dedication have been instrumental to our recent successes. Emily felt herself glowing under his praise and his attention, aware that his behavior was raising eyebrows among some of the traditional Emirati families present. A man of Rashid's status and unmarried state didn't typically squire a young foreign woman around at social events, and she could feel the speculation in the glances directed their way. Midway through the evening, as they stood together near the windows watching the spectacular fountain show below, Rashid's cousin Khalid approached them with a woman Emily had seen earlier, a beautiful Emirati woman in an expensive abaya, dripping with diamonds. "Rashid," Khalid said with false heartiness, "I don't believe. You've met Layla Al-Nahyan. Her father and yours did business together years ago. Layla has recently returned from studying in Paris." The introduction was clearly orchestrated, another attempt by Rashid's family to push him toward an appropriate match. Rashid greeted Layla with perfect courtesy but no particular warmth, making polite conversation for a few minutes before excusing himself and guiding Emily away. "My apologies," he murmured, as they moved toward the terrace where the air was cooler and quieter. "My family means well, but they are relentless in their matchmaking efforts." Emily tried to laugh it off, though her heart felt heavy. "She's very beautiful," she said, trying to sound neutral. Rashid stopped walking and turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her forget to breathe. "Beauty without substance holds no interest for me, Emily. I have learned to value qualities that go far deeper than appearance." The way he said her name, The intensity of his gaze left no doubt about what he was really saying, and Emily, standing in the moonlight with Dubai sprawled beneath them, finally admitted to herself that she was in love with a man she could never have. Emily knew she needed to create distance between herself and Rashid before someone got hurt, most likely herself. Over the next few weeks, she deliberately tried to return their relationship to a strictly professional footing. She kept her responses during morning briefings, short and business-focused, stopped sharing personal anecdotes, and made excuses when Rashid invited her to lunch meetings that didn't strictly require her presence. If he noticed her withdrawal, he didn't comment on it directly, but she caught him watching her with a puzzled, almost hurt expression that made her guilt intensify. She told herself she was doing the right thing, protecting both of them from a situation that could only end badly. Rashid was under enormous pressure from his family to marry appropriately. She was a temporary employee from a completely different world. Whatever attraction existed between them, and she could no longer deny that it was mutual, had no future. Better to end it now before feelings deepened even further. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. In mid-December, Emily's mother called with devastating news. The cancer that they thought had been in remission had returned, more aggressive than before. She needed immediate treatment, expensive experimental therapy that insurance wouldn't fully cover. Emily sat in her apartment that evening, doing the calculations over and over, knowing that even with her generous salary, she couldn't afford both the treatment costs and her living expenses in Dubai. She would have to return to Boston, find a local job that would allow her to be near her mother, and somehow scrape together the funds for treatment. The thought of leaving Dubai, leaving her job, leaving Rashid, felt like a physical pain in her chest. But her mother had sacrificed everything for her over the years. There was no choice to be made. The next morning, Emily drafted a resignation letter with shaking hands, requesting to leave at the end of the month to return to the United States for family reasons. When she placed the letter on Rashid's desk before their morning briefing, his face went absolutely still as he read it. "Family emergency?" he said, his voice carefully neutral. "May I ask the nature of this emergency?" Emily had promised herself she wouldn't cry, but the concern in his voice nearly broke her resolve. She explained about her mother's cancer, about the treatment needs, about the impossible financial situation that left her no choice but to return home. Rashid listened in silence, and when she finished, he stood and walked to the windows, his back to her, tension visible in every line of his body. The silence stretched so long that Emily wondered if she should leave. But then he turned to face her, and the expression on his face was unlike anything she had ever seen there. "How much do you need?" he asked bluntly. "For your mother's treatment." Emily shook her head immediately. "Mr. Al-Mansouri, I can't accept—" "How much, Emily?" His voice was firm, commanding, but also pleading. "Please, allow me to help." Emily's first instinct was to refuse. She couldn't possibly accept such a large sum of money from her employer, no matter how generous the offer. It felt wrong, inappropriate, like crossing a line that should never be crossed. But Rashid wouldn't hear her objections. "This is not charity," he said firmly. "Consider it an advance on your salary, a loan if you prefer. We can work out a repayment schedule over years if necessary, but I will not accept your resignation, and I will not stand by while you sacrifice your career and your mother's health because of financial constraints I can easily address." The fierce protectiveness in his voice, the determination in his eyes, told Emily that arguing would be futile. More than that, she could see that this meant something to him personally, that being able to help meant something beyond simple employer generosity. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you do this for me?" Rashid moved closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell the subtle scent of oud that clung to his clothes. "Because the thought of you leaving is unbearable," he said quietly. "Because somewhere in the past months you have become essential to me in ways that have nothing to do with schedules and meetings." The confession hung in the air between them, and Emily felt her world tilt on its axis. "Rashid," she whispered, using his first name for the first time, "this is impossible. Your family, your culture, your position." "I know," he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "I know all the reasons this shouldn't be happening. I have listed them to myself 1,000 times. You are my employee. You are American, not Emirati. You are outside the circle of women my family would consider acceptable. Pursuing anything beyond a professional relationship would create complications we can barely imagine. But Emily, knowing all of that doesn't change what I feel. It doesn't change the fact that I think about you constantly, that your happiness matters to me more than business profits, that seeing you in pain over your mother's illness causes me actual physical distress." His honesty was devastating in its completeness. Emily felt tears sliding down her cheeks, torn between joy and despair. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "I've tried not to. I've tried to convince myself it was just proximity and gratitude and cultural fascination, but it's not. I care about you, Rashid, deeply, and that's exactly why I should leave, before this becomes even more complicated." Rashid reached out and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks, his touch sending electricity through her skin. "Or perhaps," he said softly, "you should stay so we can discover what this could become. I'm not a man who makes promises lightly, Emily. I have built my reputation on integrity and on keeping my word. So I make you this promise now. If you stay, I will find a way to make this work. I don't know how yet. The obstacles are real and significant, but I am not willing to let you go without at least trying to find a path forward." Emily looked up at this remarkable man, this billionaire who could have anything he wanted, but was humbling himself before her with honest emotion and vulnerable hope. She thought about the kind of love her mother had always wanted for her, not the fairy tale romance of movies, but the real, complicated, worth fighting for kind of love that was built on respect, friendship, and genuine connection. Rashid was offering her exactly that, despite all the obstacles. How could she refuse without at least trying? "Okay," she whispered, "I'll stay, and we'll figure this out together." The decision to pursue a relationship while maintaining professional boundaries proved more challenging than either had anticipated. They agreed that at the office, nothing would change. Emily would remain his secretary, and their interactions would stay appropriately professional. But outside of work, they began to carefully explore what was growing. Between them, Rashid took Emily to dinner at small, out-of-the-way restaurants where they could talk without encountering his business associates. He showed her parts of Dubai that tourists rarely saw, traditional neighborhoods where old ways persisted alongside modern development, quiet beaches along the Arabian Gulf, the desert at sunrise when the sand turned gold and the world felt newly made. Emily, in turn, helped him see his own city through fresh eyes, asking questions that made him think about his culture and traditions in new ways, challenging assumptions he had never examined before. The more time they spent together, the more certain they both became that what they felt was real and worth protecting. Rashid was unlike anyone Emily had ever known, thoughtful and generous, but also with a quiet strength and certainty about his values that she found deeply attractive. He made her laugh with his dry observations about business competitors and social pretensions. He asked her opinions about everything from politics to philosophy and actually listened to her answers. He treated her as an equal partner in conversation, never condescending or dismissing her perspectives despite his greater experience and education. And the chemistry between them was undeniable, a magnetic pull that made it difficult to maintain the careful distance they knew was necessary in public. More than once, Rashid had to stop himself from reaching for her hand as they walked, and Emily found herself constantly aware of his presence, attuned to his mood and thoughts in a way that went far beyond professional attentiveness. But they both knew that their private happiness couldn't remain private forever. Rashid's family had already begun asking questions about why he hadn't shown interest in any of the suitable women they introduced him to. Dubai was a surprisingly small community at their social level, and rumors had begun to circulate about the American secretary who seemed to have unusual access to the unmarried Al-Mansouri heir. Rashid knew he would eventually have to tell his family about Emily, and the thought filled him with dread. Not because he doubted his feelings, those had only grown stronger, but because he knew the pain and disappointment it would cause his parents, particularly his traditional father. Sheikh Hamad Al-Mansouri had built his life on honoring family expectations and cultural traditions. The idea of his eldest son, the heir to the family business, choosing to marry outside their culture would feel like a betrayal of everything Sheikh Hamad valued. Rashid had put off the conversation for weeks, but he knew it couldn't be delayed much longer. Emily deserved more than stolen evenings and secret dinners. She deserved to be acknowledged, respected, and welcomed into his life completely, and that meant facing his family. The confrontation came sooner than Rashid had planned. In early January, his father called unexpectedly, announcing that he was coming to Dubai the next day and expected Rashid to join him for dinner, along with the Al-Zaruni family. Sheikh Hamad made it clear, without saying it directly, that this was another matchmaking attempt. The Al-Zarunis had a daughter, Mariam, who had recently completed her medical degree and whom the family considered an ideal match. Rashid knew he couldn't keep avoiding these situations, couldn't keep allowing his family to nurture false hopes while he was building a relationship with Emily. That evening, he called Emily and explained the situation. "I'm going to tell him," he said. "Tomorrow night, I'm going to tell my father about you, about us, about my intentions." Emily felt her stomach drop with anxiety. "Are you sure this is the right time? Maybe you should wait. Think about how to approach this." "No more waiting," Rashid said firmly. "I will not dishonor you by continuing to hide what you mean to me, and I will not dishonor myself by pretending interest in women I could never love when my heart belongs to you." The dinner was every bit as difficult as Rashid had feared. His father arrived with his youngest brother Khalid and the Al-Zaruni family, parents and their daughter Mariam, who was indeed accomplished and lovely and completely unsuitable because she wasn't Emily. Rashid made it through the meal with gritted teeth, being polite to Mariam while making his lack of romantic interest abundantly clear. After the Al-Zarunis departed, clearly disappointed, Sheikh Hamad turned to his son with frustration, evident in every line of his face. "Rashid, this has gone on long enough. You are 40 years old. Your mother and I will not live forever, and we deserve to see you married, to know that the family business will continue to the next generation. What is this resistance? What are you waiting for?" Rashid looked at his father, at Khalid watching with curious concern, and knew the moment had come. "I am waiting for you to accept that I have already found the woman I want to marry, father. She simply isn't Emirati." The silence that followed was deafening. Sheikh Hamad's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and finally a cold anger that Rashid had rarely seen directed at him. "You are involved with a foreign woman?" his father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Who is she? How long has this been going on?" Rashid explained about Emily, her background, her character, her work for the company, and how their relationship had developed over months of working closely together. He tried to convey his certainty about his feelings, his conviction that Emily was the right partner for him despite the cultural differences. But Sheikh Hamad wasn't listening to the content. He was focused on what he saw as betrayal. "Your secretary?" he said, his voice rising. "You are telling me you want to marry your American secretary? Have you completely forgotten who you are, what responsibilities you carry? You are a sheikh, Rashid. Your marriage isn't just a personal matter. It affects the family's standing, our business relationships, our place in this community. And you want to throw all of that away for some woman you hired to answer your phones." Rashid felt his own anger rising at the dismissive way his father characterized Emily. "She is not some woman, father. She is intelligent, educated, hard-working, and has more genuine integrity than most of the supposedly suitable women you've paraded in front of me. I respect her deeply, and I love her. Those are the qualities that should matter in choosing a life partner." Sheikh Hamad shook his head, looking at his son as if he were a stranger. "Love," he said bitterly. "You sound like a teenager, not a man who runs a billion-dollar company. Your mother and I had our marriage arranged by our families. We learned to love each other over time, building a partnership based on shared values and mutual respect. That is how our culture has operated for centuries. But you think you know better than generations of wisdom. You think your feelings are more important than family honor. Khalid tried to intercede, suggesting they all take time to cool down before continuing the discussion. But neither Rashid nor his father was listening. The argument escalated, painful truths flying back and forth, until, finally, Sheikh Hamad delivered his ultimatum. If you pursue this relationship with this American woman, you will be choosing her over your family. We cannot and will not accept such a marriage. You will have to decide what matters more to you, this infatuation or your place in this family. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Rashid felt something break inside him, the final rupture of the hope that his family would accept Emily, that he could have both the woman he loved and his family's blessing. Then I choose her, he said quietly, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff with no certainty that there would be anything to catch him. I choose Emily, Father. I hope someday you will come to understand why, and I hope someday you will meet her properly and see what I see, but I will not give her up, not even for you. Sheikh Hamad stood, his face a mask of disappointed rage. Then you are no longer my son, he said, the traditional words of disownment that every Emirati child feared. And you are no longer welcome in our home in Abu Dhabi. I will inform your mother of your decision. I suspect it will break her heart. With that he left, Khalid trailing behind with a troubled, sympathetic look at Rashid that offered no comfort. Rashid sat alone in the restaurant for a long time after they left, feeling the weight of what he had just done. He had effectively cut himself off from his family, not just his parents, but his siblings, his extended family network, all the social connections that had shaped his entire life. The consequences would be severe and far-reaching. His father had significant influence in the business community. Doors that had been open might now close. Family gatherings, traditional celebrations, the warm sense of belonging he had always taken for granted, all gone. But as he sat there contemplating the wreckage of family relationships, Rashid also felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in his life, he had made a choice based purely on what he believed was right, what would make him genuinely happy rather than what was expected or required. He had chosen authenticity over convention, love over duty. Now he just had to find Emily and hope she understood what that choice would mean for both of them. Emily knew something was wrong the moment Rashid walked into her apartment that night. She had given him a key weeks ago, a symbol of trust and commitment, even though they had been careful about when he used it to avoid neighborhood gossip. His face was drawn, exhausted, and when she asked what had happened, he simply pulled her into his arms and held her for a long moment before explaining the catastrophic dinner with his father. As he recounted the argument and his father's ultimatum, Emily felt horror and guilt wash over her. "Rashid, no," she said, pulling back to look at him. "You can't lose your family because of me. We have to find another way. Maybe if I talk to your father, if I could explain." Rashid shook his head firmly. "There is no other way, Emily. My father's position is absolute, and I know him well enough to understand that he won't change his mind easily. He sees this as a matter of family honor and cultural tradition. No amount of reasoning will convince him otherwise right now." Emily felt tears streaming down her face. "But your mother, you said she's been recovering from her illness. This stress could affect her health. And your siblings, your whole family. You can't just give them all up. Not for me. I'm not worth that." Rashid cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "You are worth everything to me," he said fiercely. "And this decision isn't just about you, Emily. It's about who I want to be, what kind of life I want to live. For 40 years, I have done everything expected of me. I built the business my father wanted. I lived according to all the cultural rules. I honored every tradition and custom, but I will not, let others dictate the most important decision of my life. Marriage, partnership, love. These things are too fundamental to surrender to other people's expectations. I choose you because I love you, yes, but I also choose the right to make my own choices about my own happiness. Emily understood what he was saying, admired the courage it took to stand up to his family, but she also knew the cost would be enormous, and she worried that eventually he might come to resent her for it. "What if in 5 years or 10 years you regret this decision?" she asked quietly. "What if you miss your family so much that you end up hating me for being the cause of the rift?" Rashid was quiet for a moment, considering her question seriously. "I won't lie to you. I hope desperately that my family will eventually come around, that time and persistence will soften my father's stance. But even if that never happens, I know myself well enough to say with certainty that I would regret losing you far more than any estrangement from family. Emily, you have brought light and joy into my life. You challenge me, inspire me, make me want to be better than I am. Whatever the future holds, I choose to face it with you." They held each other that night, drawing strength from the knowledge that they were in this together, that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as partners. The next few months tested that commitment in ways neither had anticipated. News of the rift between Rashid and his family spread through Dubai's close-knit Emirati community with stunning speed. Some of his father's business associates became notably cooler in their dealings with Al-Mansouri enterprises, and Rashid lost 2 significant contracts that seemed guaranteed before the family dispute became public knowledge. Social invitations to important events dried up, and Rashid found himself increasingly isolated from the community he had been born into. Emily watched him navigate these losses with quiet dignity, never complaining or expressing regret, but she could see the pain it caused him. She suggested multiple times that he reconsider, that they could perhaps wait a few years and try again when emotions weren't so raw, but Rashid refused to even discuss it. "Waiting won't change my father's mind," he said, "and I won't put our lives on hold hoping for acceptance that may never come." In April, Rashid took the relationship to the next level by proposing formally. He didn't do it with a grand gesture or elaborate setup. That wasn't his style. Instead, he asked her one evening as they sat on her apartment balcony watching the sunset, speaking with simple sincerity about wanting to build a life together, about choosing her every day for the rest of his days. The ring was stunning, a single perfect diamond set in platinum, classic and elegant like everything about Rashid. Emily said yes through happy tears, though joy was mixed with anxiety about what marriage would mean. They would have to navigate cultural differences in everything from wedding plans to future children's upbringing. They would have to build their own family. When Rashid's family refused to participate, they would have to create new traditions while honoring the good parts of both their backgrounds. It felt overwhelming, but when Emily looked at Rashid's face, saw the love and certainty there, she knew they would figure it out together. The wedding took place in June, a small ceremony by Dubai standards, but perfect for them. Since Rashid's family refused to attend, he was walked down the aisle by his loyal friend Omar, who had stood by him throughout the family crisis. Emily's mother flew in from Boston. Her health improved thanks to the treatment that Rashid had funded. She walked Emily down the aisle with tears of joy, grateful that her daughter had found a man of such character and devotion. The ceremony itself blended elements of both cultures. They exchanged vows in both English and Arabic, honored Emirati traditions where possible, while keeping the focus on their personal commitment to each other. Friends and colleagues from the company attended, along with some of the expatriate friends Emily had made in Dubai. It wasn't the massive family celebration that Rashid's marriage should have been, but it was genuine and meaningful and full of love. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Rashid whispered in Emily's ear, "No regrets, not one." And Emily believed him. The first year of marriage brought its own challenges and joys. Emily continued to work for the company, though she transitioned to a different role in marketing rather than remaining as Rashid's secretary, both to avoid any appearance of impropriety and to develop her own career path. She discovered she had a talent for understanding market dynamics and customer psychology, bringing fresh perspectives to the company's expansion strategy. strategies. Rashid supported her professional development enthusiastically, proud of her accomplishments and never threatened by her growing competence and confidence. At home, they navigated the daily negotiations of cross-cultural marriage with patience and humor. Emily learned to cook some traditional Emirati dishes, though she would never master them like Rashid's mother might have. Rashid learned to appreciate American holidays and traditions that Emily wanted to preserve. They created their own hybrid customs, Friday brunches that combined American breakfast foods with Arabic coffee, decorating their home with art from both cultures, speaking a mixture of English and Arabic that reflected their blended life. The hardest part was the continued estrangement from Rashid's family. His mother had called once, shortly after the wedding, crying and begging him to reconsider, telling him it wasn't too late to annul the marriage and come home. Rashid had gently but firmly told her that Emily was his wife now, that he loved her and would not leave her, and that the family was welcome to be part of their lives whenever they were ready to accept that reality. His mother had hung up in tears, and there had been no contact since. His siblings sent occasional messages through third parties, expressing their own conflicted feelings, love for their brother, but loyalty to their parents, curiosity about the woman he had chosen, but fear of defying their father. Rashid bore it all with as much grace as he could manage, but Emily knew it hurt him deeply. She tried to fill the void with her own warmth and devotion, but she understood she could never fully replace the family he had lost. Then, in early December, almost exactly a year after Rashid's confrontation with his father, everything changed. Rashid received an urgent call from Khalid, his younger brother. Their mother had collapsed again, this time more seriously than before. She was in the hospital in Abu Dhabi, and the doctors were uncertain about her prognosis. Khalid made it clear that their father had not authorized this call, but he thought Rashid deserved to know. Emily watched her husband's face as he processed the news, saw the pain and the impossible choice written there. "Go," she said immediately. "Go to her, Rashid. Your mother needs you, and you need to see her. I'll be fine here." Rashid looked torn. "My father won't allow me in the hospital, and showing up might cause more stress for my mother, which could make things worse." Emily thought for a moment, then made a decision that surprised even herself. "Then we'll go together," she said. "It's time I met your family properly, and maybe seeing us together, seeing that we're happy and committed, will help them understand." Rashid looked at his wife with wonder and gratitude. "You would do that? Face my father's anger, risk his rejection?" Emily took his hand firmly. "For you? For us? I would do anything." They flew to Abu Dhabi the next morning, Rashid making calls during the drive to the airport, trying to reach Khalid for updates on their mother's condition. By the time they arrived at the hospital, Sheikha Amina had stabilized somewhat, but she remained in serious condition. Khalid met them in the lobby, looking exhausted and worried. He greeted Rashid with a tight hug, then turned to Emily with cautious curiosity. "So you are the woman who stole my brother's heart," he said in English, his tone neutral but not hostile. "Welcome to our family crisis. Father is upstairs with mother. I should warn you, he's going to be very angry when he sees you both." Emily squared her shoulders. "I understand, but we're here for your mother, not to cause trouble. If you could just tell us where to find her room." Khalid studied her for a moment, then nodded with what might have been respect. "Follow me." The confrontation with Sheikh Hamad happened outside Sheikha Amina's hospital room. The older man emerged looking haggard and aged, the stress of his wife's illness evident in every line of his face. When he saw Rashid, his expression hardened, but when he saw Emily standing beside his son, he actually took a step back, as if physically struck. "What is this?" he demanded in Arabic, though Emily had learned enough by now to catch the gist. "You dare bring this woman here, to your mother's sickbed?" Rashid responded calmly but firmly, also in Arabic. "Father, this woman is my wife. Her name is Emily Al-Mansouri now, and yes, I brought her here because we both want to see my mother and to support this family during a difficult time." The use of the family name combined with Emily's married title seemed to infuriate Sheikh Hamad further. He launched into a rapid tirade, too fast for Emily to follow, but the anger and rejection were clear in every syllable. Emily had planned to stay quiet, to let Rashid handle his father, but watching this man berate the husband she loved, seeing the pain on Rashid's face as he absorbed his father's harsh words, something inside her snapped. "Excuse me," she said loudly in English, surprising everyone into silence. Sheikh Hamad stared at her as if she had grown a second head. Apparently, foreign wives were not supposed to speak during family confrontations, but Emily continued, drawing on every ounce of courage she possessed. "Sheikh Hamad, I know you don't approve of me. I know you think I'm not good enough for your son, that I don't understand your culture, that I somehow tricked or manipulated Rashid into marrying me. But I want you to know something. I love your son more than I can express. He is the finest man I have ever known. Honorable, generous, thoughtful, and kind. Those qualities didn't come from nowhere. They came from the way you and your wife raised him, from the values you taught him, from the example you set. So while you may hate me, while you may never accept me, I will always be grateful to you for giving this world the man I love. And I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of him." Sheikh Hamad stared at Emily in stunned silence, clearly not having expected such a direct speech. Before he could respond, a nurse emerged from Sheikh Amina's room looking concerned. "Sheikh Hamad, your wife is asking for you. She says she heard voices and wants to know who is here." The older man looked torn, but his concern for his wife won out. He went back into the room, leaving Rashid, Emily and Khalid in the hallway. A moment later, they heard Sheikh Amina's voice, weak but insistent, calling for Rashid. "She wants to see you," the nurse said, poking her head out. "Both of you." Rashid and Emily exchanged glances, then walked into the hospital room together. Sheikh Amina lay in the bed, looking fragile but alert, her eyes fixing immediately on Emily with keen interest. "So," she said in accented but clear English, "this is the woman my son chose over his family. Come closer. Let me see you properly." Emily approached the bed, her heart pounding, intensely aware of Sheikh Hamad glowering from the corner of the room. Up close, she could see that Sheikh Amina had been a beautiful woman and still retained an air of dignity despite her illness. The older woman studied Emily's face for a long moment, then reached out and took her hand. "You love my son?" she asked directly. "Yes," Emily said simply. "More than anything. And you make him happy?" "I try to. He makes me happy too." Sheikh Amina nodded slowly, then turned her gaze to Rashid. "And you, my son? No regrets?" Rashid moved to his mother's other side, taking her other hand. "Not one, mother. Emily is my partner, my companion, my joy. I am sorry it has caused you pain, but I cannot and will not regret choosing her." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "You sound like your father and me when we were young," she said softly. "He was supposed to marry someone else, you know, a woman his family had chosen. But he chose me instead, despite our family's objections. His father didn't speak to him for 3 years. The revelation hung in the air like a bombshell. Sheikh Hamad made a strangled noise from the corner, but Sheikh Amina ignored him, keeping her eyes on Rashid and Emily. "Love makes fools of us all," she continued, a small smile playing at her lips. "And sometimes the most foolish thing is trying to dictate matters of the heart. Rashid, I have been lying here thinking about what matters most. I thought it was tradition, family honor, maintaining our ways. But I realized what matters most is that you are happy, that you have found someone who values you as I see this young woman does. I have wasted a year being angry when I could have been getting to know my daughter-in-law. I don't want to waste any more time." She squeezed both their hands. "Will you forgive a foolish old woman who let pride and tradition blind her to what was truly important?" Rashid was crying now, tears streaming down his face as he bent to kiss his mother's forehead. "There is nothing to forgive, mother. I love you." Emily also had tears in her eyes as Sheikh Amina pulled her closer for an embrace. The reconciliation wasn't immediate or complete, but Sheikh Amina's acceptance of Emily opened the door for gradual healing. Over the next few weeks, as she recovered from her health crisis, she asked to see Rashid and Emily regularly. She wanted to know everything about Emily's background, her interests, her family. She asked about the wedding she had missed and looked genuinely sad when Emily showed her pictures from the small ceremony. "You should have had a proper celebration," she said wistfully, "with family and tradition. But she also listened with interest when Emily talked about the hybrid customs they were creating, the ways they were honoring both cultures in their daily life. Sheikh Hamad was slower to come around. He attended some of these visits but rarely spoke, watching his wife and son interact with Emily with an expression that Emily couldn't quite read. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, his hostility began to soften. He corrected Emily's Arabic pronunciation one day, not mockingly but instructively. Another time, he actually asked her a question about American business practices, seeming genuinely interested in her perspective. The real breakthrough came 3 months later, when Emily discovered she was pregnant. She and Rashid had been hoping to start a family, but hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. The joy they felt was almost overwhelming, tempered only by the question of how to share the news with Rashid's no family. In the end, they decided to tell Sheikha Amina first, during one of their regular visits. The older woman's reaction was everything they could have hoped for, pure, unrestrained joy that she would finally have a grandchild. She immediately called Sheikh Hamad to share the news, and for the first time since the estrangement began, Rashid heard something like warmth in his father's voice. "A child," Sheikh Hamad said quietly when he arrived at the house shortly after the call. "You will give us a grandchild." He looked at Emily, really looked at her for perhaps the first time, and his expression softened. "Then you are truly family now. A child changes everything." Over the remaining months of Emily's pregnancy, the family bonds slowly rebuilt themselves. Sheikh Hamad would never be effusive or openly emotional, but he began to include Emily in family gatherings, introducing her to relatives with a gruff pride that suggested he had accepted, if not fully, embraced his son's choice. Rashid's siblings warmed to Emily as well, relieved that the family tension was finally easing. His sister Fatima became particularly close to Emily, excited about becoming an aunt and eager to share advice about pregnancy and motherhood in Emirati culture. When Emily went into labor in early spring, the entire Al-Mansouri family gathered at the hospital, a stark contrast to the lonely confrontation that had taken place in that same building a year and a half earlier. The baby boy was born healthy and perfect, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's smile. They named him Hamad Rashid, honoring both grandfather and father. And when Sheikh Hamad held his grandson for the first time, Emily saw tears in the old man's eyes. "He will bridge 2 worlds," Sheikh Hamad said quietly, looking at the baby. "Emirati and American, tradition and change. Perhaps that is not such a bad thing after all." 5 years later, the Al-Mansouri family had grown and flourished in ways that exceeded everyone's expectations. Emily and Rashid had 2 more children, a daughter named Amina, after Rashid's mother, and another son named Michael after Emily's late father. The children were being raised bilingual, comfortable in both kanduras and blue jeans, equally at home eating mansaf and macaroni and cheese. They spent weekends with their Emirati grandparents in Abu Dhabi and video chatted regularly with their American grandmother in Boston, who visited Dubai several times a year and had become an honorary member of the Al-Mansouri extended family. Emily had risen to vice president of marketing at Al-Mansouri Enterprises, her fresh perspectives and cross-cultural insights proving invaluable as the company expanded into new international markets. She had also become something of a bridge between Emirati traditionalists and the growing international community in Dubai, respected by both groups for her genuine effort to understand and honor Emirati culture while bringing her own unique perspective. Rashid had never regretted his choice, not for a single moment. If anything, the challenges they had faced together had strengthened his conviction that choosing love over convention had been the right decision. He had his family back, though the relationships would always carry scars from the painful estrangement. More importantly, he had built a new family with Emily, one founded on authentic connection, mutual respect, and the courage to forge their own path. He watched his children growing up comfortable in 2 cultures and felt proud that they would never have to choose between their heritage and their happiness the way he had. Business continued to thrive despite, or perhaps because of, the family drama that had briefly threatened it. Many of Rashid's business associates, particularly the younger generation, had quietly admired his willingness to stand up for his principles, and some had even taken it as inspiration to challenge their own family expectations about arranged marriages. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Rashid took Emily back to the same restaurant where they had danced at their wedding reception. As they sat watching the Dubai fountain perform its spectacular show, the same one they had watched on the night of that fateful company gala so many years ago, Emily reflected on everything that had happened. Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you had accepted one of those suitable women your father wanted you to marry? She asked Rashid. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Sometimes, he admitted, I think I would have been comfortable, perhaps even content. I would have honored my duties and maintained family harmony, but I would have missed this joy, this partnership, this feeling of being truly known and loved for exactly who I am. And I would have missed knowing you, which would have been the greatest loss of all. Emily squeezed his hand, her heart full. They had taken an unlikely path, faced enormous obstacles, and built something beautiful from nothing but faith in each other. I love you, she said simply. Thank you for being brave enough to choose me. Thank you for being worth choosing, Rashid replied, pulling her close. And thank you for teaching an old sheikh that sometimes the most important business decision has nothing to do with money or power. It's knowing when to risk everything for the one thing that truly matters. As they drove home that night to their children and their life together, Emily thought about all the romance stories she had read growing up. Tales of princes and princesses, billionaires and secretaries. None of them had prepared her for the reality of true love, messy, complicated, requiring constant work and compromise and courage. But none of them had captured the profound satisfaction of building something real with someone who chose you every day, who saw your flaws and loved you anyway, who was willing to fight the whole world for the right to stand by your side. She glanced over at Rashid, his profile illuminated by the lights of Dubai streaming past the car window, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the day she had taken a risk on an international job, for the billionaire who had seen something special in a secretary from Boston, and for the love that had surprised them both and changed everything forever.